Уважаемые участники, напоминаем о необходимости получения приемников синхронного перевода.
I'd like to remind you that it's necessary to get the equipment to listen to the simultaneous translation. You can get it in the conference hall. Dear colleagues, dear colleagues, good afternoon. I would like to welcome everyone once again, and first of all, let me congratulate you on the International Day of Standards. And we have this tradition every year in the middle of October. During the week when the International Day of Standards is celebrated, we meet here in the President's Library. The specific feature of this event is that 760 participants joined us online, and only 100 participants are presented here within this beautiful building, but still we consider that geographical center of this event is St. Petersburg, and that's why let me give the floor to Vice Governor of St. Petersburg, Mr. Evgeny Ivanovich Yelin. Good afternoon, dear friends. On behalf of the governor, first of all, let me thank you for choosing St. Petersburg as a place for annual event. Let me congratulate you on behalf of the governor. With the 95th anniversary of ROS Standard and the World Standards Day, we understand that St. Petersburg was chosen not only for being a beautiful city, but St. Petersburg is the city that understands the role and the meaning, the value of the standards and standardization. 20 years ago, standards and the term standard was a topic for a limited number of specialists, designers, engineers, technology specialists, and standards were associated with the thick books where you would have to choose different nuts and bolts, and standard was a kind of a table on the drawing, and the technical standards were described there. 10 years ago, we just understood all of a sudden that standards is not only about technical things, but this is ISO. These are best practices, and the management system also can use standards. And pharmaceutical sphere suggested a lot of ideas here, and we started introducing standards in our everyday life and activities. We started using such words as processes. We applied standards to different procedures, and we understood that standards are a much wider term. And recently, we understood that we have new ideas. There are standards of secure, safe activities and processes. 1 hour ago, we had a meeting and we discussed how to ensure the standards for safety and apply the standards in our city. We understood that standards is not a thick reference book, but this is in fact our life. It regulates our life and our citizens' everyday activities, so everyone should be guided by standard in their activities. And we understand the importance of the thing, of everything that you are doing, and we realize how important is the conference which is held here today, and we are ready to support you, and we would like to wish you a success and wonderful, great results, and we will be waiting for introduction of the results of your activities. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Evgeny Ivanovich. Dear colleagues, now let me start our session. It's a second session of this forum. It's called Protecting the Planet with the Help of Standards. This phrase became a slogan for today's anniversary, World Standards Day. And another tradition of our forum is not only executing it in St. Petersburg, but also participation of the leading leaders of different industries and heads of different standardization bodies and authorities from different countries. And we should note that this year, 2020, due to well-known reasons, our international colleagues, could not come from other countries. But still, St. Petersburg became the center, uniting such centers as Sydney, Ottawa, Geneva, and Singapore. All the colleagues will be together with us. They will join us, and they will describe the role of the standards in this very complicated year, 2020. You know, a few months ago in the internet, there was a meme which was quite popular. It was a kind of a joke, the phrase from a famous movie. The main rule of the year 2021 never mentioned 2020. But I don't think that anybody would be able to not to recollect the year 2020, but we still can discuss what are the lessons of this complicated, difficult, tough year, how to protect the planet, and how we should use the standards in the future for future development. And that's what we would like to discuss today with our honored guests. And the first guest whom I would like to give the floor is the General Secretary of International Standardization Committee, Mr. Sergio Mujica. You're welcome, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Anton. And thank you to all of you for inviting me. So just one second. Okay, so thank you for inviting me to celebrate with you and in this very important occasion. There you go. Okay, so my first message to all of you is Happy World Standards Day. We are all celebrating together in this very important occasion. And I wanted to start off by sharing a date, which is the 22nd of August, because that day, the 22nd of August, marks the day where we consumed all natural resources that can be regenerated by the planet during the year 2020. That means, in practical terms, that after the 22nd of August, we've been consuming natural resources that our Earth does not have the capacity to regenerate beyond that limit. So that, I think, illustrates very well why what we're doing today is so important, and that the role of standards, once again, is indispensable to address this challenge. And I'm very happy as well to say that we are working together with our colleagues and friends of the IC and ITU in celebrating the World Standard Day in this very important topic. Second point is the context, because protecting the planet with standards is very closely linked to the Sustainable Development Goals, which are a real roadmap for the Earth, for all the planet, to improve the living conditions of everybody. And what is important here is this represents the consensus of around 200 countries. So we are all in agreement that this is what we have to do if we want to improve our planet. And I am very happy to see the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, very closely aligned with the next ISO strategy 2030, because the vision for our organization is making life easier, safer, and better, which is very much human-centric as well, in the same manner that the SDGs are. However, one thing is agreeing on what we have to do, and a very different thing is to be able to do it and to deliver according to the expectations, because the SDGs are supposed to be implemented by the year 2030. But as we can see on the screen, Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, a couple of years ago said, if we keep working at this speed, at this rhythm, we will not be able to implement not even 50%, not even 50% of the SDGs when we arrive to the year 2030. So that brings us to a very strong sense of urgency if we want to be effective in this area. And this statement by Antonio Guterres was before the COVID emergency. And we all know that during this year, this famous 2020, we've been deeply affected by this crisis, with over 40 million people infected and over 1 million people dead. According to the IMF, the world economy will be reduced in at least 5%, and the international trade will be reduced between 15 and 35%. So this is the context, and the even much greater sense of urgency if we're talking about the implementation of the SDGs, and also the need to protect the planet with standards. And in this context, I have to say that I'm very proud of our organization of ISO, because we have been able to deliver and to show an incredible resilience in this context. And I would like to share with you a couple of areas where there are important lessons to learn here. And the first one is the need to be agile and responsive. So very early in the emergency in March, we decided that all our meetings, both technical meetings and governance meetings, would be held virtually. And this created a window, a rolling window of predictability of 3 months. This is challenging. It's difficult to do in practice because we didn't have experience. The good news is that we knew how to work virtually. We had around 20% of our technical meetings held virtually before COVID. But after COVID, that 20% became 100%. And this is a huge laboratory, and this is the beauty of it. It's an interesting opportunity. It's a huge laboratory where we can all test and learn together. And what kind of thing we have learned? First, that we were prepared but not fully equipped to deal with the emergency. We need to review our rules. For example, just one example, our council meetings can be held virtually, but we cannot take formal decisions in those meetings. So this is an area where we need to review the rules. The second thing is that we need to review our processes and also our deliverables. Today, we do not have the capacity to deliver in a very quick time frame a new standard. We can do it in a couple of months, maybe, but we could never deliver a new standard in 1 or 2 weeks. And sometimes this emergency required that kind of response. And the third one is the need to engage even closer with our users. And in this context, I'm very happy to see that we are moving forward in machine-readable standards or smart standards, and a big recognition in this area to Anton precisely, who presented this very transformational project to the Council, to the ISO Council a couple of weeks ago. Second area here is the need to review the tools we have. We have seen good progress in the online collaborative authoring tool, which we are deploying together with my friend and colleague Philippe Metzger from the IEC. This is a joint project. We have also created new IT tools, but this is something that we need to monitor very, very closely. But when it comes to digital meetings, there is one thing that we have observed that I think is an important lesson for the future. When we have virtual meetings, we have seen increased participation of our experts in the technical meetings. And this has a huge impact, especially for developing countries. And talking about developing countries, the third area where we have made important changes is in the delivery model of our capacity building activities. We were focused on regional face-to-face workshops that had to change, and we are now transforming our activities into virtual activities. But if we want to improve in the future, we need to create more digital content, and we also need to improve our capabilities to deliver e-learning and capacity building. Second key lesson is about communication and engagement, which is of the essence to deal with the emergency. In this context, we conducted an unprecedented campaign where we reached out nearly 90% of our members with individual but structured interviews, and we learned a lot. And one of the key lessons there is that our members want to share. They want to exchange ideas, experiences, challenges, etc. And in that context, we have organized a member dialogue sessions where we have had this opportunity to share about engagement with users 2 weeks ago, about gender equality yesterday, and Chantal Gouy, who is part of this panel, shared that session yesterday, which was incredibly useful and interesting, and also about agility. And thirdly, we created a platform where our members can share their national responses to the COVID emergency and also the national resources they have created. And lastly, the third key lesson here is that if we want to be effective at global level, we need to create global solutions. And that means that cooperation with other international organizations, especially our colleagues and friends from the IEC and ITU, but beyond that, cooperation with other international organizations is of the essence. We need to work together to create global solutions by consensus, and this is more urgent than ever. With that, I will stop. In my presentation, I had a number of examples about what kind of standards we're working on today to help protect the planet, but I will leave it at your disposal so you can review it later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mujica, please stay with us. In the end of this session, there'll be a Q&A session. Yeah, truly, the ISO has demonstrated the flexibility mentioned by Mr. Mujica 2 weeks ago. For the first time in over 70 years of ISO history, the General Assembly was conducted, but completely in an online format. And the national bodies representatives joined and discussed the topical issues of standardization. However, we'd like to also hear about using the experience of using standards for protection of the planet and for how they're dealing with the challenges of the year 20. One more international standardization organization, very familiar to Russians. That's the International Electrotechnical Commission. So the floor is given to Mr. Philip Metzger, the General Secretary of that organization.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of IEC, I would like to express our gratitude to GHOST-R and the Eurasian Commission to enable us to combine and share our common expertise and experience. May I seize this opportunity to congratulate GHOST-R on its 75th anniversary and wish you all the success for the future and good health during this utterly testing period that we all have to endure together. I am particularly happy to connect with you on the World Standards Day. Every 14th of October, the work of the three global standards organizations, IEC, ISO, and ITU, is highlighted, and the time and efforts of the thousands of experts that help develop international standards is celebrated. So this is a truly auspicious day for holding your unique event out of St. Petersburg of international and regional dimension. And as you may know, this year, the World Standards Day poster competition is dedicated to that very theme, protecting the planet with standards. So please join me in congratulating the awardee, the winner of this year's competition. It is a woman. They also receive other awards than the Nobel Prize. It is Miss Jyoti Bisht from India, who works as a designer at Tata Consultancy Services. Now, what are the lessons learned in 2020 from the perspective of the IEC, of the association that I am representing, and how can standards protect the planet on the international and industry-specific levels? There are obviously many lessons, but I would like to focus on four areas very briefly. One, the first, virtualization. The second, the issue of connecting more and better, and traveling less. The third is lending support in difficult times at both levels, both international and national. And also, fourth, of course, the cooperation beyond traditional boundaries. So if we start with virtualization, from an operational point of view, talking as the CEO of an international association with global reach, virtualization was clearly standing out during this highly unusual year, when on the 16th of March, the IEC had to switch from one day to the next, from face-to-face meetings to online only, and all our staff at this IEC central office had to work from home. We were tested very much in terms of our core IT systems and the online tools at our disposal. Thanks to the robustness of this fundamental infrastructure, we were indeed in a position to continue the standardization and conformity assessment work with, I would say, minimal disruption. But of course, we were also privileged in that the IEC has been pioneering digitization for many years. And so it was therefore manageable for us to switch from mostly face-to-face to virtual meetings and online work in a very short time. Directly related to virtualization is the need to connect more and better when travel is mostly impossible. I mean, face-to-face meetings clearly have a different dynamic from online meetings, which require extensive advanced preparations to produce the right interaction and the right information sharing. And so online consensus building, which is of course a key feature of IEC, consensus building, is certainly more complex, but also to some degree offers opportunities for the involvement of more people in an open and transparent setting. So undeniably, working online lacks a number of dimensions that are important in the long run for a successful and innovative collaboration. But under these circumstances that we are now, we are nonetheless obliged to hold our 2020 general meeting at the IEC between the 9th and the 20th of November exclusively online, and that is of course a real challenge for the organization, but it is also an opportunity to test the agility of our association. Looking beyond the mere day-to-day functioning of our standards and the development and conformity assessment machinery, I think lending support during difficult times is a key element of how we are operating in 2020. In fact, the pandemic has enabled the IEC to attract attention to tools and services that allow both public and private organizations to better cope directly and indirectly with major crises. And for example, the IEC, together with the ISO, led by my colleague and friend Sergio Mujica, have made several standards related to the accelerated production of critical medical ventilators available free of charge in support of the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, this allowed companies to refurbish their production lines and to rapidly produce much sought after medical ventilators of satisfactory quality and safety. And also, moreover, IEC international standards allow countries to accelerate their national manufacturing and to build essential solutions locally, which is particularly important when global manufacturing is slowing down and trade becomes more difficult. So I think this approach of also allowing national manufacturers to send more local products beyond borders ultimately is certainly very important in the long run. The last and certainly not the least aspect of lessons that we have learned in 2020 so far is that cooperation is more important than ever. In late 2019, we advised IEC and ISO members and staff that both organizations were continuing to advance information exchange and collaboration, and we had already strengthened our cooperative efforts in terms of IT matters, which made a significant progress in implementing new digital solutions. But since then, we have also progressed significantly with the substantial work that our two organizations are producing. Both the IEC and ISO have deployed significant efforts to take advantage of other opportunities to work more closely together, to avoid duplication, to build capacity worldwide, and of course to enhance also diversity and inclusivity and COVID-19, which requires significant business continuity planning, has clearly demonstrated that both our organizations work together well and that we have achieved substantial progress in building a cooperative and collaborative culture in both organizations. I would also like to add that we will, of course, continue to exchange information and collaborate on key policy matters. Most recently, in October, the ISO TNB has established a climate change coordinating committee whose mandate includes to facilitate communication and coordination of activities on climate change with the IC and ITU, and that is going to be a very important field of cooperation going forward. Now, this brings me, and I'm coming to the end of my intervention, this brings me, of course, to the question raised and put to us, how IEC international standards help protect the planet in the future. First, our IEC standards are encompassing globally accepted best practice in terms of safety, reliability, security, and interoperability. And all of this allows both public and private organizations to manage quality and risk to better weather and recover from disasters. The second point that I would like to emphasize is that horizontal IEC standards assist the emergence of a circular economy, reducing waste and prolonging the life cycle of products. And here, the IEC Advisory Committee on Environmental Aspects is considering all the issues of the protection of the natural environment. Third, very important aspect, cyber attacks on operational systems can directly impact the environment by causing oil or chemical spills, for instance, explosions, interruption of energy supply, etc. And the IEC develops cybersecurity standards that help protect operational technology in industrial and critical infrastructure. And together with the ISO, IEC is also developing the ISO IEC 27000 series of standards to protect online networks from cyber attacks. Now, of course, there is a specific item feature that IEC offers, which is conformity assessment. And here we have two systems, the IEC IEE and ICQ systems that are proposing programs to verify and certify cybersecurity as well. Finally, and I'm coming to a point that Sergio Mujica has already touched upon in terms of the overarching sustainable development goals, standards together with the ICCA systems clearly and directly support the achievement of those goals. And the impact that they have or can have is very broad. I obviously do not have the time now to list different standards and testing schemes for the protection of air, water, land, or other natural resources, but it is quite clear that the impact of those products and services is very broad, both for society and the economy, because we always bear in mind that what we do, of course, has to be human-centric. And contributing even more to the 2030 agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals is certainly a key challenge going forward for our organization, but it is also a key opportunity for us. The relevance of our work, of the work with you as experts and members, is not always visible from the outside. So we have to deploy additional efforts to connect the dots and to enable the stakeholders, including businesses, for which there is a real case here in the context of the SDGs, to meet the future goals of humanity together. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Metzger. Dear colleagues, the examples of ISO and IEC prove that disregarding the traditional comprehension of standards as of something very rigid and conservative and not flexible, ISO and IEC proved how quickly these organizations, these bodies managed to modify their working methods and to have very good achievements in the year 20. In some areas, they even improved their efficacy. However, the challenges of the year 20 were topical not for international standards organizations only, but for the whole regions. Hence, the regional standards organizations' role is of vital importance. They're more focused on trade relations of the countries within the regions. Hence, I'd like to give the floor to the chair of the Executive Committee of the Asia-Pacific Congress on Standardization, Council on Standardization. He is also the Executive Director of a Standardization Council of Canada, Standardization of Canada Council. Madame Chantal Guay, she's now in Ottawa. It's only 6 in the morning over there. However, she made it to participate in our forum. Madame Guay, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Anton. Happy World Standards Day, everyone. Happy 75th anniversary to GOSTAR. And thank you so much for the invitation. It is early in Ottawa, but I'm pleased to be here. So what are the lessons learned in 2020 on how standards can protect the planet? A healthy environment is certainly an essential component to our well-being and economic prosperity. And the urgency for action regarding climate change is widely felt. It is affecting every country around the world, disrupting economies and affecting lives. 2020 has presented us with many challenges, but also some new opportunities, and Sergio and Philip alluded to some of them. It has shown us that we are very connected, regardless if you are from Russia, Indonesia, Canada, or Fiji. We're all interconnected, and so is our environment. We only have one planet to share, and ensure it will remain viable for the generations to come. That's our duty. The additional time people have had to reflect during self-isolation or quarantine on critical issues such as the environment has catapulted the protection of the planet to very high importance and motivated several societal sectors to take active steps to address the issues at hand. I think we've heard good examples again from ISO and IEC. Still, I will argue that we are at a critical tipping point. As members of the Pacific Area Standards Congress, the regional standards organization for the Pacific Rim countries, changing weather patterns, rising sea levels, and more extreme weather events pose an important and increased threat level to us because of our geographic positioning and vulnerability. 2020 extreme weather events felt around the world included frightening floods in Japan, super cyclones in Bangladesh and India, incredible devastating wildfires in Australia and the States. And here in Canada, we suffered crippling blizzards along the East Coast, blazing wildfires in the West, and a lot of flooding in Eastern Canada where I live. These extreme weather events are resulting in ever-increasing costs for governments, businesses, communities, and citizens. There are standardization efforts being made at the national, regional, and international levels. For example, at the international level, past members are key contributors and leaders in the effort to develop standards to address the impacts of climate change, including ISO Technical Committee 207, Environmental Management, and the ISO 14000 family of standards, as well as Technical Committee 322 on Sustainable Finance, Technical Committee 323 on Circular Economy, as well as Technical Committee 324 on Sharing Economy. Personally, as an environmental engineer, I believe that standards can indeed protect the planet, but we need to be deliberate about it. When writing standards, we are very deliberate about many considerations, but very seldomly do we actually fully integrate the concepts of sustainable development. That concept was part of the Brundtland Report back in 1987. That is more than 30 years ago. We care about quality, we care about safety, we care about health of humans, but we often forget the world we live in. Actually, we care about it, but for today, with not a lot of consideration for the next generations. What about the world my granddaughter, I'll be a grandma next year, will live in? As Sergio mentioned, we are not working quickly enough to meet the SDGs by 2030, and we are running out of time. You might have heard, as I have, that the current pandemic is a rehearsal for what is to come with climate change, except that right now, the pandemic is just a sprint, while the impacts of climate change will be a marathon. I do hope that most nations will realize that unless we are deliberate about protecting the planet and ready to take drastic actions, it is our species that will lose, and quickly. And based on how we have managed the current pandemic, I think there's a lot of work ahead of us. We've done good things, but we have a lot of work to do. The standardization community is absolutely ready to move forward and do more, but it will require very heavy lifting and very close collaboration within many sectors. It is great to see ISO, IEC, and ITU joining forces. However, that is not sufficient. There are certainly more interest from the financial sector. All these extreme weather events are very costly to communities and companies, and the insurance and the financial sectors have been noticing and want to be part of the solution. Certainly going forward, we will need to build bridges with those sectors if we want a solution fit for purpose. There's no doubt that the past community is committed to being part of the global solution of protecting the planet. Luckily, we already have a suite of standards we can build on. We're not starting from a blank piece of paper, but different communities have different needs. Some past members are involved in developing national standards to directly address the impact of climate change at home, to adapt. But we need to also look beyond and focus on mitigating the impacts if we want to ensure safe and sustainable communities. A good example of mitigation is infrastructure standards. Standards that consider climate change impacts in design, planning, and management. Creating standards that incorporate climate risks will not only ensure the resilience of infrastructure over the long term, but could also help address the root cause of the problem, changing how we build infrastructure by using lower carbon energy sources and making better design and operational choices. That could decrease the need for costly maintenance and repairs and reduce future greenhouse gas emissions, the main cause of climate change. But are we doing enough among ourselves in the standards community to share this information and ensure that we find ways to adapt the needs of Canada can also help address similar issues in India or Peru? We also need to focus on more than just standards. We need to ensure we have the necessary conformity assessment programs in place as well so that we build confidence. So is the standardization system ready to protect the planet with standards in response to future challenges? I would certainly want to say yes, but I do believe that we have a lot of work to do unless we truly learn from the current crisis. Sergio has mentioned a number of lessons learned that ISO will be using. That's certainly encouraging. But again, I believe we are running out of time. We need focus, resolve, and courage. Difficult decisions will need to be made by all, governments, businesses, communities, citizens. Although we have seen some very promising results when it comes to standards development and conformity assessment, we have only dealt with a fraction of what is needed to build a resilient future. There is much more to do. An example, to this day in Canada, in my part of the world, we continue to build homes in floodplains. We are working currently to standardize flood mapping so that we reduce the dire consequences of flooding for communities. We have been experiencing floods for hundreds of years in parts of the country. Almost every year there's a flood. We need to learn. We need to learn quickly. We need standards to protect our citizens from sweltering in heat waves, as we need standards to fill critical gaps where communities meet forests so that lives and property can be saved when wildfires hit. These are only a few examples, and there are similar needs across many of the partners in the Pacific. We not only have to work on reducing the impacts of climate change on our lives today, we also need to ensure that we are finding ways to minimize our environmental footprint. So there is a world for my granddaughter. So what are these future challenges? Climate change and sustainability will continue to be a key focus in the years to come. It must be. From a standardization perspective, I see three key challenges. If there is no sense of urgency, we will not get there. We need to be deliberate enough to do what is needed. So how do we collectively ensure that we maintain that sense of urgency so governments, businesses, communities, and citizens stay focused? Our future challenge is also to integrate the needs of both developing and developed countries in this area. Very different challenges. Finally, another is to how to organize and package the standards in a way which makes them easy to implement with clear outcomes that will meet the goals associated with protecting the planet. We are all in this together. By working together, we can take concrete steps to mitigate and adapt to climate change and future extreme weather events. Standards need to be a central part of the plan, and all past members are ready to contribute and continue their resolve, their focus, and their efforts. Thank you.
Большое спасибо, Шанталь.
Thank you so much, Chantal. Colleagues, this year became the challenge not only for all of us, but for economics as well. The whole industries all over the world went through significant changes, and governments, state administrations used to support different industries. And here we have to consider the standards as the tool of the industry development, and I think the next speaker will be able to describe us the lessons of the current situation and what we should use for further development of the industry. Now I would like to give the floor of the academician of the Russian Academy of Science, the head of the committee on the vice president of the Machine Building Council and the president of ISO 2011-2012, Boris Sergeyevich Alyoshin. Good afternoon, dear friends, colleagues. I'm really pleased to see you all here. It's a great day for us, for standardization industry, and it's a big honor for me to join these discussions and to celebrate this day, discussing our views and approach towards development of the world and development of this organization. I am a person who should talk about the industry development, but still, I would like to start with a different topic. Our responsibility for what is happening in the world. Our world, our planet is fragile. People go through a lot of dangers, and there are a lot of wars going on. The climate is changing due to application of the new technologies which are harmful for our environment. And the most difficult, the most dangerous thing is that we face such a new challenge for us as the infection. And a human becomes very fragile and can be hurt by this new challenges, and but we should overcome this somehow, and we should move on. A famous physician, a Nobel Award, mentioned in his speech that within the whole life I was dealing with the degradation of the nucleus and everything related to the nuclear physics, but I've never been considering what's happening around, and I was really obsessed with this nuclear physics. But now I'm mainly concerned how we are going to keep the Earth, how we can help the sustainable development. And here I would like to talk about the role of the standards in this difficult task. But I do not fully agree with Mrs. Guai. I don't think it's a short-term process. We are talking about the pandemic, and I think in the future we will see how it's going to develop, this infection. And what's important for us, it is crucial to understand that standards accumulate the best practices, and it means that in these kind of situations that we are now, this World Health Organization announced the pandemic and then the lockdown. In most countries, the governments were acting on the basis of their own understanding of how this infection will develop in the future, how it will spread. They were considering how to prevent spreading of such disease, and it was really a difficult economic period for many countries. And I think that if we would have the best practices, if we would have studied before these practices, and we would have introduced the standard procedures for prevention of these kind of diseases in the future, then probably we could have avoided a lot of consequences, and we would move on. We would have a better progress. So we have to focus on the best practices of those countries who managed to save lives and support their citizens in the times of this pandemic. And I think standards are really important here and could become a future guideline. And here I'm talking about each and every country and association and community. It doesn't matter which country are we living. It's really important to unite the efforts, and we have to consider seriously how to do that. And the cybersecurity issue was mentioned before. The fact that we must have a lot of meetings now and conferences and events in the remote way, in the online mode. It demands a high level of security and flexibility, and we should realize that everything that we discuss, quite frequently, there are a lot of confidential information and issues and business priorities and competition. So one of the most important issues here is ensuring the cyber safety and cyber stability. And I think this is another problem, which is a large-scale problem, and we should as well focus on development of solutions for these kind of problems as well within the standardization development. And I would like to talk about a third component, the economics. Standards can play a crucial role, and the further we away from each other, we have internet connections between us, but we are far away and we cannot discuss all the issues. We cannot stay in front of the computer within 24 hours, day and night. And it's really important to understand that the bigger is the number of standard solutions in the economics, the better and the easier is the development of economics in every country. And it will definitely result in the increase of efficiency in the economics, and of course it will improve the responsibility for the economic development. And this is the third direction where we should join our efforts. And of course I am quite confident that one of the most important conditions for us is living on the planet Earth and understanding that apart from all other threats, one of the most important issues for us is maintaining a comfortable living conditions, taking care about the environment and providing the future where people will not fight for the resources, and the resources have their limits. We have to consider this. We have to focus on this. And we should analyze all these issues and try to understand what are the priorities for the international organizations, what shall be done first, and the international standardization can help a lot to solve these important international problems. So thank you very much for your attention. I would like to congratulate you once again on the occasion of this Standards Day. Thank you and goodbye. Take care. Thank you so much, Boris Sergeyevich. Next part of our session today will be dedicated to the experience of separate countries and national authorities for standardization, how they faced the challenges of this year, those challenges that were mentioned before by the heads of ISO. And the first speaker today is the head of National Organ on Standardization of Singapore, Mrs. So Kook Choi. Please, Mrs. Choi. Мне бы хотелось поздороваться со всеми. Добрый день. И хочу еще раз поздравить с празднованием Дня стандартизации. И мне бы хотелось подчеркнуть важную роль стандартов в достижении целей устойчивого развития. Также очень важно, конечно, поддерживать бизнес-сообщество. Но говоря о целях устойчивого развития и экологии, это те главные цели, на которых необходимо сфокусироваться. И в рамках проблем, с которыми мы столкнулись в этом году, учитывая пандемию, мы понимаем, насколько важно объединить наши усилия в борьбе с этими кризисами. Сингапур очень сильно подвержен климатическим изменениям, и с этой точки зрения очень важно усиливать борьбу с изменениями климата. И комитет по вопросам изменения климата прилагает все усилия и применяет у нас серьезный подход по борьбе с изменениями климата, и на сегодняшний день
as usual levels, and we aim to halve carbon emissions from the peak in 2030 with a view to achieving net zero as soon as viable in the second half of the century. So how do we get there? You can see on the slide the key national sustainability roadmaps that we have put in place. So, for example, the Climate Action Plan lays down the strategies and targets to improve energy efficiency for reducing emissions across sectors. So we aim for 80% of buildings in Singapore to be green by 2030, cleaner vehicles by 2040, and also we aim to deploy at least 2 gigawatt peak solar energy by 2030. So over the years, Singapore has leveraged innovation and technology to achieve its goal in developing a sustainable and livable city. So the slide here shows the ground-up initiatives where government agencies collaborate with industry thought leaders to support sustainable urban solutions that will help meet our sustainability goals. So on the top left-hand corner, you will see solar panels that are deployed in our water reservoirs. This is yet another way that we try to harness solar energy to the maximum extent possible, besides the land-based ones. So this is despite the fact that we are a very, very small country. And on the top right-hand corner, you will see the new water facilities that we have built to produce enough water to meet half of Singapore's current water demand. And as we move towards a zero waste nation, we aim to introduce waste that are sent to the landfill each day by 30% by 2030, and also achieve an overall recycling rate of 70% by 2030. And to do all these, we need to leverage on new technology, such as your waste-to-energy plant to produce slag from waste gasification as construction material, and also to prolong the space that is available in our Simacau landfill. So, in support of our sustainability initiatives, agencies and industries work with ESG, SSC in developing the necessary standards. And these are just some examples that you see on screen that is developed across different areas such as energy, water, waste, environment, and food sectors. And if you look at the broad level, we participate in the development of ISO standards under the TC 207 on environmental management, and where we also promote strongly to the industry to adopt. At the domain level, ESG has come up with various standards across sectors. For example, the standard for the design, installation, and maintenance of solar PV systems, because we see this as most promising renewable energy source for electricity generation for us. So with the experience gained, ESG will continue to work with our stakeholders to develop new standards to support Singapore's initiative to move towards a low carbon and resource efficient economy. So you may have heard about Singapore as a green and clean city. This is partly achieved through much emphasis that we place on closing the waste loop, from pollution control to waste collection and treatment. So, and here are some examples that we have on the standards developed to support such efforts. So, for example, we have standards on the Code of Practice for Pollution Control and Hazardous Waste Management used by our local environment agency in their regulations to safeguard clean air, clean land, clean water, and a quality living environment. In the area of recycling, we have, for instance, used recycled concrete aggregates derived from construction and demolition waste, where standards help to define the performance of the recycled aggregates for structural concrete. So this has helped to increase the recycling rate for construction and demolition waste by 99%. So in summary, there are 3 takeaways that I'd like to share based on our experience thus far. Firstly, it is important to have a tight nexus between NSB and its stakeholders at the local level to address sustainability issues. Secondly, international standardization work are important to help develop impactful and timely standards that will harmonize sustainability practices and requirements globally. And last but not least, the use of technologies such as blockchain, drones, and digitalization to support sustainability efforts will likely increase in the coming years. And so therefore, it is important for NSBs and international standardization bodies like ISO and IEC to work with industry, research institutes, government and intergovernmental agencies to identify, develop, and promote the use of standards that facilitate the deployment of such technologies. Now I'd like to just move on to the question posed on the views to the future. I'd like to offer 2 perspectives to this question. So from what we are seeing at the local level, we anticipate more requests for standards to promote community participation for sustainability, such as in the area of measuring and benchmarking sustainability efforts at the town council level. And so increasingly, we will be looking to town councils as stewards of sustainable towns. An example of such standard that we have developed is the standard for pneumatic waste system, which enables cleaner and more efficient waste collection at the community level. My second perspective relates to standards and the climate change agenda. I think standards, be it at the national or the international level, have to be developed in a manner that is harmonized with and complement the existing ecosystem of established instruments and establishments, such as UNFCCC, IPCC, UNEP. Given the different national circumstances of countries, I think there is no one-size-fits-all approach on how countries should approach their climate actions and strategies. In fact, the Paris Agreement is designed to allow countries flexibility to nationally determine the measures that they should pursue to mitigate and adapt to climate change. But nonetheless, I think it will be useful for governments and industry to consider how cooperative efforts to set sustainability standards can contribute to the global climate action. And at the same time, I think standards should be compliant with WTO regulations and also not discriminate and create barriers to trade. Standards also need to be developed in time to be relevant to the issues of the day. And so these are just several factors that need to be considered in developing a standard for it to work effectively with other instruments, such as policies and laws, as well as institutions to enable protection of the climate. So this is all that I have to share, and I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Большое спасибо, госпожа.
Thank you very much, Madam Choi. The next speaker to share experience shall be the head of the National Standardization Body of Australia, Mr. Edwin Okola. He is the Chief Executive Director. And I'd like to mention how heroic he is. Unlike Canada, in Sydney, where he is now, it's late night. So thank you very much for making it to be with us tonight. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Anton, and thank you, Gostar. So good morning and good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are in the world listening today. It certainly is my pleasure to be here with you to celebrate two occasions, the World Standards Day, but also the 95th anniversary of GOST-R. I was in fact in St. Petersburg in 2013, and it is indeed a most beautiful and historic city, and I very much wish I was with you in person to make this presentation. But that said, of course, the theme of the World Standards Day is protecting the planet with standards. And this theme would resonate in any year, but it's particularly applicable in 2020. When asked what lessons the world's learned in 2020 at the national, regional and international level, there are many, and I think you've heard many from the other speakers already, and I won't repeat those. But what I will do is illustrate some key examples from the Australian experience. The first, as you might expect, of course, relates to COVID-19. Many of us have been forced to embrace new ways of working, and some of us have had to pivot our operations altogether to meet new global demand. The standards world has had to adapt, as Sergio and Philippe said, just like the rest of us, and we are already seeing new efficiencies and solutions to these emerging challenges. To look at specific examples in the Australian context, the Australian government was quick to develop a COVID app to manage and contain the spread of infections. With data protection measures in place, the information collected has helped to develop dashboards and visualizations in order to understand the impact of COVID-19. The Australian experience has been leveraged to develop two international standards on data usage to help organisations in their decision-making process for sharing, exchange and exploitation of data sets. Before the pandemic hit, Australia was hit by one of the world's most devastating bushfire seasons, threatening our land, homes, our wildlife and the lives of many. The fires in Australia burnt roughly 19 million hectares of land, destroyed close to 6,000 buildings along the way. It's estimated that the damage to property and the economy totalled well over 100 billion Australian dollars, making it one of our most costly natural disasters. The Australian standard for the construction of buildings in bushfire-prone areas was critical during this time. It was an adaptation measure, as Chantal says, not a mitigation, but it nonetheless provided guidance to professionals in the building and the construction industry to constructing buildings for the improved ability to withstand bushfires, and it was very successful. However, when we talk about lessons, the long-term lesson for the community was not about the value of the standards in response to this traumatic event, although it was important. Instead, standards should be used as a prevention so that when devastation strikes, the destruction is minimised. And I think this goes to the point of standards both being adapting to climate change, but also standards for the mitigation of climate change. Taking this concept of forward thinking, another lesson for the energy sector. Collectively, we all need to invest more in standards for renewable energy sources. The energy sector in Australia and across the globe is in a rapid period of transformation and change. Australia has enormous potential to be powered by renewable energy due to its unique climate, vast landscape, and being surrounded by open ocean. Safety, of course, has traditionally been the main driver for standards development in this sector. However, there is now increasing focus on the move towards low carbon economy through clean energy, reliability of supply, and energy performance. As Australia moves to source more renewable energy, strong standards governing safety, storage, and transport can help build confidence across industry sectors and the Australian community. Currently in Australia, 86% of our electricity comes from fossil fuels, but it's estimated by 2025 up to 75% will come from renewable. So we're working closely with the solar energy experts in Australia to lead the world in household solar installations by a large margin. As homes increasingly switch to solar, standards are key to ensure safe and reliable grid integration. Wind is also a main source of renewable energy for us, and we are working with stakeholders to increase our participation internationally, as Australia is home to two of the biggest per capita wind generation jurisdictions. And although we are surrounded by water, marine energy is a source underutilised in Australia. We are working with industry to have a greater voice in the development of standards on marine energy technology. And hydrogen is also gaining momentum across the globe and making tracks into the Australian market. It is predicted that the hydrogen industry could generate many thousands of new jobs by 2050, with the exports in the Australian context valued at $11 billion per year in additional gross domestic product. Construction is starting on a $300 million hydrogen plant in Western Australia, which will be the country's largest hydrogen production facility. And we've also signed a landmark agreement with Germany on hydrogen production. So you can see there is huge potential for renewable energy, but for hydrogen in Australia, and we are making sure that standards are part of this conversation to support the safe storage, the transport, and the refueling of hydrogen. We've seen great progress of this in Australia, and with the recent adoption of 8 key international standards for hydrogen. The lessons, when we're talking about the lessons learned, the lessons from these examples in the energy sector is the importance of industry, government leaders engaging with their national standards body. There is a lot of work to be done, and none of it can be done alone. Lastly, I want to talk about Australia's water efficiency and labelling standards, or what we call WELS. The Water Efficiency and Labelling Standards Scheme in Australia is one of the most successful water conservation programs and one of our country's most successful environmental schemes overall. This scheme helps to conserve water by supporting consumers to make informed decisions and encourages the uptake of water-saving devices. In response to this success, we've led the establishment of a new international committee at ISO, which is now developing a water efficiency labelling program standard for use around the world. The lesson here is the international system provides a platform for us to share our successes and learn from each other. It's estimated that this program, this scheme, has the potential to save 112 gigalitres of water every year in Australia alone. So over 5 years, that's the equivalent of saving all of the water in Australia's Sydney Harbour. So in conclusion, the internationally trusted standards development process, which Australia supports, provides a useful platform to explore, to shape, agree, and to move forward on ways for protecting the future of the planet. Standards play a critical role for supporting and responding in times of crisis, but also in preventing and protecting communities before trauma hits. And for effective outcomes, there needs to be the active engagement between standards bodies and a broad range of stakeholders. We need to engage with industry, with the experts, we need to engage with those innovators of technology, and we need to engage with the highest level policy makers. Between global pandemics, natural disasters, and more sustainable solutions for energy, standards have and will continue to play a role in protecting our planet. Thank you again for the opportunity to make this brief presentation. There's many more lessons. Some of them have already been covered off by my other speakers, so I won't go into them, but happy to take any questions at a later point in time. Thank you very much, Anton.
Большое спасибо. Большое.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Connell. And the next speaker, the head of the German Institute for Standardization, National Standardization Authority, Mr. Halter. Floor is yours.
And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And first of all, congratulations and happy birthday to Ghost R for his 95th birthday. Today we are celebrating World Standards Day. And I think we saw a lot of good examples from Singapore, from Australia. I mean, how standards can actually help to contribute to fight climate change. But I would like to elaborate a little bit on the standardization process and why it's so important that we are changing and constantly learning within the standardization community. I mean, standards are a quality promise. So accepted standards are the base of a functioning quality infrastructure. So we need to ensure this in the digital world. I think it's very important that we understand that technologies like cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, they need to be an integrated part of the digital infrastructure. We are not there yet. We have to learn how to do this. So there's a lot of work in front of us to make sure that the digital transformation can really be utilized to fight climate change, but that requires an infrastructure that is really ensuring that we have quality if there is digital services complementing kind of physical devices and technologies that we intend to deploy. I mean, standardization is the starting point of a quality infrastructure. So standardization is worth nothing without conformity assessment. So standards are the base, but it requires a professional system of accreditation, certification, and market surveillance to make sure that the standards are actually understood, widely used in the intended way. So education about the importance of standards, the importance of the standardization system, and how standards are created is absolutely essential. So the next generation can understand the value of standards and the power of standards in order to deploy new technologies to fight climate and to actually make the future a better one. So standards are building trust. And we are all in agreement that in order to fight this climate change, in order to master the green transformation, we will need new technologies. But these new technologies require trust. Trust in the society, trust in industry, before they can actually be deployed on a large scale and in critical areas. So standardization needs to get involved in these new technology development and deployment processes very early to create roadmaps and be part of the plan how to deploy these new technologies and make use of it. So industry must perceive and use standardization as a strategic instrument, even when designing new technologies. And it's our job to convince all the stakeholders how important standardization is. the public-private partnership, the policymakers working together with the private sector, is absolutely essential to be fast and agile in deploying standardization, in deploying industry policies, and kind of standardization in support of regulation. The green transformation requires a significant change in industry and society. It requires a change in behavior of all of us. We won't change our behavior if we haven't bought into some clear rules that everybody understands. So stakeholder involvement, participation of all stakeholder groups is absolutely essential to get buy-in not only for new technologies, but for the necessary behavioral change that is needed in order to succeed. So the standardization organization, they must be a role model. They must work together. We need to be efficient. We need to avoid double work. We need to ensure consistency of the standards that we are developing. And most important, we need to involve all the stakeholder groups in the standards development process. So it's really essential that starting from the international point of view, that ISO and IEC are actually working extremely close together to have a consistent set of standards that help us to fight climate change and to master the digital transformation. Without standards, we will not be able to successfully manage neither the green nor the digital transformation. Then it is our responsibility to contribute to that. And I mean, we have it in our ISO strategy. It's about all voices heard. All voices heard means stakeholder involvement, means getting buy-in from all the societal groups that the standards that we are developing are the right solution and everybody is committed to use those. Consensus building is in the heart of standards development. So it's not one against the other. It's discuss until we have reached a consensus. That will secure buy-in. That will secure buy-in to new technologies. That will secure buy-in to a change in behavior that is desperately needed. And last but not least, the user-friendliness and accessibility of the standards content. I think we have embarked a journey in the standardization community to make standards available in a digital format, which will be needed once we have a more digital economy. And we want that these new standards are not only quickly created, but they are efficiently and widely used in the best possible digital way. I think we call it smart standards, standards machine accessible, readable, and transferable, which will be a key enabler to deploy future standards on a broad scale. But during the pandemic, we have learned that we need to work together. We need to show solidarity, but it's kind of a simple statement by saying solidarity requires compatibility. Because if you're not compatible with somebody else, it's hard to help him. Because your products, what you would like to offer, is incompatible and cannot be used. So achieving compatibility through international standardization is absolutely essential. And that requires a very, very important role given to the international standardization organizations, in particular ISO and IEC. And what we have also learned during the pandemic, I mean, standards need to be understood and they need to even be accessible by those who are in need of those standards immediately. I mean, we made a set of standards available free of charge to support our economy, to support the society, to enable industry to switch production from automotive parts to medical devices, from coffee filters to face masks. I mean, all these companies, they needed new standards they have never, ever used before in order to understand what they need to do, to reconfigure their supply chain, to use existing technology, produce different type of products in order to help fighting this pandemic. And the private standardization organizations, they were supporting by making these documents freely available and to provide expertise from within the expert community by providing Q&A portals to make everybody understand what these new standards that they have basically received the first time, what the essential of the standard is and how it can be used. So in an exceptional situation, we could actually prove as a community that we can support, we can develop standards very quickly. So some standards have been developed in a couple of weeks, which would have been considered completely impossible before. I mean, now we're having this conference completely virtually, or at least it's a hybrid conference, but we are participating from all over the world without traveling. I think that's an important contribution to climate change as well. I mean, we have learned that we can reduce travel dramatically, and we should do so in the future as well. So the use of web technology, new meeting rules, and new structures, how to conduct, let's say, our technical committees. That's what we have learned, and we need to keep it in order to be more professional, to be faster, more efficient, and to reduce CO2 emissions. I think it also showed us that we can much easier have a more frequent international exchange, like we have today. I mean, this is important. We need to do this. We need to work together on a much broader scale. We need to use technology to be even more open and transparent and involve all kinds of stakeholders in the process. But most important, standardization is a major contributor to climate change and to digital transformation, but it only works if we work together. We're open-minded, open for change, to optimize the standardization processes and to work together to fight these different challenges that we have ahead of us. Thank you very much.
Большое спасибо.
Thank you so much, Mr. Westerhalter. And irrespective of the fact that we have some delays, we are out of schedule, and still I would like you to listen to the description of future prospects for the standards and how the standards can protect the planet, the Earth in the future, and the work of organizations working on the standards development for fields, for different industries, those standards which are applied in the industry. And here I would like to give the floor to Vice President of DNV company, Mr. Nils Andres Masvi, who has managed to participate personally in this event, and he has signed the agreement on the interaction with ROS standard. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and Anatoly Pavlovich. I apologize. I wouldn't like to create obstacles between you and lunch break. That's why I will be brief. I would like to give some historical reference, and I would like to remind you how important are the standards and how they have already ensured economic growth in the past. In the 19th century, international classification societies generated the standards for navigation, and I think that international commercial trade today wouldn't be possible without free trade organized between the vessels that we see today. In the 20th century, the standards for dimensions of the containers were developed. And I also think that we do not really understand how huge was the contribution and how it has supported the logistics and the commerce in the past. And as a private company, we also want to participate in this, our company, DNV. But the standards reflect those technologies which exist. And for innovations, for the future, we still have to analyze the risks and the qualification of the new technologies. And here, we all participate in the process, and we follow this approach that not only government, but government, together with the public sector, should work together closely, should cooperate in order to be able to solve not only the issues related to existing technologies, but also new technologies, work for the future. Now, today we are in St. Petersburg, and DNVGL was presented in St. Petersburg before October Revolution in 1917. The fact that we are here in the library, presidential library named after Yeltsin, is the fact, and we also reopened our office in St. Petersburg, and we continued cooperation with our customers in Russia through St. Petersburg office. That's why these are two examples of cooperation and development of the standards, which are also related to planet protection. 5 or 7 years ago, DNVGL, Gazprom, Gas, Equinor, Total, and other large companies were working on the selection of a few standards for oil and gas operations in the Barents Sea in the harsh environmental conditions. And this was a very good example of joint cooperation for development of the standards for secure operation in the harsh climatic conditions. About 1 hour ago, Standard Inform and DNVGL signed an agreement about cooperation on this dedicated to spreading of our technical standards on the territory of Russian Federation for our company, for all the companies of oil and gas industry. And these international standards will be applied in offshore in Russian Federation. Here, I would also like to emphasize that it's just like a ballet dance. It's nice, beautiful. It looks very exquisite. And you see a nice picture easily presented. But what's behind this beautiful dance? There is a huge work performed. Whatever you see seems to be very easy, but there is a hard work behind. And the same can be applied to the standard. A good standard looks natural and easily applied, but we should always remember that there is a huge work executed by many people. I would also like to congratulate Standard Inform, because it's really difficult to understand, to realize what are the cultural, language, administrative problems that you face during the international cooperation when trying to approve this kind of standards. But you see, we have managed to conclude this agreement, to sign it, and we also participate in this. And we try to provide the new standards for oil and gas industry of Russian Federation on the continental shelf and other countries. Thank you for your attention. Dear colleagues, first of all, I would like to thank all the speakers for their interesting speeches, and on behalf of the National Standardization Authority of Russian Federation, Rosstandard, I would like to congratulate all participants of today's session. And I was just informed that online and offline we have 890 participants, and I would like to congratulate everyone with the World Standard Day. And unfortunately, we do not have enough time to discuss all the reports, but maybe it's not bad, because we have the impression that we have just started today a very important discussion about standards, ability to support the society, the community, business, governments in this new world. Many people used to say that the world will never be the same. We have heard this during the year 2020, but from the speeches of our speakers today, we understood that, yes, it's true. This is related not only to the challenge of pandemic, but this is also digitalization and new economic realities and climate changing, and we should consider thoroughly how the standards will help us to overcome not only the crisis situations, but how to develop the society, how to develop the economics, how to develop the new companies in this new reality. This is a dialogue which I hope we are going to continue next year during this forum, and I hope all the foreign guests will be able to join personally our event next year. Thank you very much. Now we have a break.
A lunch break is announced. After lunch, there'll be separate